by Stephen Jones. Hello.
Hello, Lou.
Tell me, I'm very, very impressed because you did some absolutely fantastic hats for the Thom Browne show.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about the hats for Autumn Winter 15.
Well, I mean, I did hats for women's and men's, both in a similar vein. Both shows were really about the idea of mourning dress and about the ones who we love are dearly departed, and that was Tom's whole thing about it. And I really researched mourning hats through the ages and what mourning meant and what the hats were supposed to represent and the idea of sort of hiding from the public gaze. And, you know, there were so many extraordinary images that I found, whether they were the picture of Queen Mary and the Queen Mother and the present Queen Elizabeth in mourning, or the wife of Martin Luther King when she was in mourning. I mean, all these particularly extraordinary women. But I also found out when I was working on the men's show that there was a certain time during Victorian times where men wore veils as well.
How interesting. I didn't know that at all.
No. Normally they were sort of in the funeral cortege, and they wore veils, which were tied around their top hats, actually.
Oh, wow. It's interesting that you say, you know, when you were doing your research, because one of the things that I wanted to ask is when I looked at this collection, obviously, you know, the entire outfits, but particularly the hats, they do look very informed by historical shapes. And
yeah.
It's interesting that you say you did a lot of referencing, but did you have to kind of really do your history lessons on this? Because for something like mourning dress, I mean, I know just from going to the amazing Met exhibition about mourning clothing, the rules and regulations are sort of really, really, really intricate and sort of, you know, quite niche and strange almost. Did you get sort of really sort of caught up in that?
Yes, I did do. But the funny thing is, you know, when you do research, I mean, for example, having worked with John Galliano for many years, yes, you do all the research, but then you leave all that behind. And then you create something new based on that research, because actually there's not much point recreating the past, because they've done a different thing and it was right for them. So actually, yes, you're making a mourning hat, but somehow trying to make it modern, and whatever modern means, and I'm never really sure about that, as somehow fashion less and less can be determined by time somehow. It's more apart from the 80s, which you've already talked about in reference to one particular show, you and Alex.
Very much so. Tell me a bit about the creative process of working with someone like Tom, because you've had a kind of a long relationship with him. You know, you've worked on a fair few shows, and how does it work? Does he kind of give you carte blanche? Does he say, "This is what I've got in my head"? How does it work? And is it very different from designer to designer?
Totally different. I mean, with Tom, it's really, really unusual. I mean, I knew him socially beforehand. And then one day he phoned up and he said, I've been thinking about this for a long time, but I'd love you to work on the collections. I think the thing which is unusual and actually unique about him, that he actually comes to London for long weekends, and I sit and draw with him, and then we start to make toiles with him actually here. It's not that I'm visiting him. He's actually that into the making of hats and the system of drawing and everything, that he will give up time from his busy schedule and really invest time, effort and money into it. So yes, he will come with a picture of a dress. He will come with a drawing of a dress. And I might have done research, but I sit there and draw in front of him, which is always a bit terrifying. It's a bit
that
like
sounds terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like reciting a poem on stage at school. You know, it's enough. And you know, you can bet your bottom dollar that, you know, when I'm drawing it, I'll draw the eyes, because I'm always drawing heads. I'm not really drawing figures, but I'll sort of draw her eyes wonky, or, you know, her neck will be too skinny or too fat or something like that. So I'll have to do it again and again. I mean, drawing is not one of those things that you can turn on and off like a tap. Sometimes my muse is visiting me, sometimes she isn't.
And tell me, it's interesting that you say how sort of, you know, how passionate he is about it, with the fact that he comes over and works alongside you. Does that mean he has more fixed ideas about sort of does he see the hat as, a real key part of the outfit, not just an accessory?
Yes, but he absolutely does not have a fixed idea. He's fascinated at the whole process. America, even though he's doing men's tailoring, which is so much of a handmade thing, that basically, most of fashion is extremely mechanized. However, hat making isn't. And he's fascinated to see how it actually all happens. And he loves to look at the blocks and the way that we're steaming and how it looks on the fit model. Every part of the process. I mean, he loves the sort of artisan character of what we do and being part of that.
It's interesting. One thing that I just wanted to ask aesthetically was I felt, looking at the hats for this show, they were so different to what you'd done the season before. The season before I felt like there was so much whimsy, and especially, we've talked about it before, but I love the shuttlecock hat that you did.
Sure.
Whereas this season, they did feel a little, I think obviously, particularly because of the theme of the collection, but they felt more subdued. And I was wondering, do you try and do that? Do you try and kind of, go, oh, well, last season we went this way, this season we'll go that way, and try and always just kind of keep people guessing?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This season, it was so often about being correctly dressed. Because I think the thing is, if you were to go to a funeral, if you were to celebrate somebody's life, yes, somehow there's it's just something about being perfectly dressed. And really what I wanted to do was make the perfect hat to go with that outfit.
Oh, that's interesting.
It wasn't about being extravagant or not extravagant. It's just, actually, if you're wearing a neckline like that, what would be the perfect silhouette or the brim line or whatever to go with that neckline? And it's so strange because actually nobody ever wants that from me. That's something about my very, very classical training that I had, but I don't think any designers ever wanted the perfect hat to go with the correct outfit, because actually so much modern design is about not putting the perfect thing or not putting the correct thing. And that was also very interesting about this show, that it was about making the right thing.
And sometimes it must be so, it's interesting sometimes to work within rules and regulations and think about appropriateness and things being proper. It can be quite creative, that process, can't it?
But, 99% of the time, people are talking about, let's break the rules.
Yeah, exactly.
But actually, that becomes a rule within itself. The rule is to break the rule. The idea that, you put your purple outfit on and, hey, let's put on a pair of green shoes with it. I mean, that's the norm, actually. It's completely reversed the other way around. But if you're to be very sort of orthodox about, yes, your shoes must match your outfit or your hat has to match your outfit, in a way, it's very non-democratic fashion. Because it's much more difficult to achieve, it's much more expensive, and, it isn't for everybody. I mean, I have to say it was so much easier because it was all in black.
Yeah, I can imagine that did make it a little bit easier. You didn't have to worry about clash.
But it's a slightly sort of weird point of view. And I think it's also, to me, I mean, I know I sound like Grandpa when I'm saying this, but it's sort of slightly at the end of punk, we started to fit, in the late 60s, in the late 70s, early 80s, we started to think, well, what's next? Because everything had been broken, and the idea of something historical was suddenly fascinating. And in fact, historical was more punk than punk was. And in a funny way now, sort of matching is more unusual and revolutionary than non-matching. I don't know. I mean, fashion always goes through cycles. But it was extremely interesting, this idea of being correctly dressed, because that seems to be such a sort of elusive and archaic in a way of presenting yourself.
I think this notion of Prada did a collection. It was like 3 seasons ago. That was all about kind of appropriateness and being properly dressed. And you're right. That's such a kind of traditional concept, but it felt so modern. I think for such a long time we've got so used to this idea that you can wear anything to anywhere. Day and night are blurred.
Yeah.
Those rules, they can feel quite exciting when you actually sort of get them out again, afresh.
Yeah. I mean, that's why people sort of get excited by dressing formally, because it's suddenly a whole different set of rules to play with.
Absolutely. So where are the hats now? Are they still in New York?
They're still in New York. They're being shipped over to Paris at the moment because he only sells in Paris. He doesn't sell in New York. So they start their sales season next week. But it was a complete adventure making all those hats. And also they were sort of loosely based on hairstyles. I don't know if people realize that. Yeah, that there was, certain hairstyles. So, for example, I referenced Vidal Sassoon in it and the 5-point cut. There were things sort of like classic Grace Kelly hairdos, but executed in pleated fabric. We had Marilyn Monroe waves executed in pleated fabric.
What made you want to incorporate the hairstyles as an element?
I think it was when I first saw Thom about this collection, which was actually in December. It was just before Christmas. We had talked about this, and the idea of hairdos were just one or two different sketches that I did, and then after Christmas, we both felt that was the strongest idea, and a good thing to hook the collection on, because in a way, after we'd started to work on the men's show, and they were the two different sides of the same coin, we did all very formal top hats, and because that was such a predefined shape, we wanted to do something a bit different for the women's, and in a way more feminine, in the way softer.
Tell me, do you ever get to a point where when you're doing a new season, you feel like, will I be able to make a shape that I haven't made before? Because you must feel like you've made every hat that could possibly exist.
No, there's loads of hats out there which I haven't done. Yeah, no, it's different. It's different every time, and it's actually a very good sort of check, really, because if you think you have to if you are doing something that you've done before, you're probably not listening to the designer very well.
That's interesting.
You're probably coming to the table with a preconceived idea of what you're going to do and what you're about and what is beautiful and what's ugly. And actually, you have to keep your ears and eyes open to a whole new lot of things. And maybe, because I'm older now, a whole new generation who are understanding things in a different way. So that's great, and that's the great thing about fashion, because it sort of keeps you on your toes.
Very, very true. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay, my pleasure.